Abhyayantu Mangani Vakvanishchakshushrotvam Bhavamatvanjani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahmanopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakvayam Mama Brahma Nirakaro Anirakarnameyastu Anirakarnameyastu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishadsu Dharma Ste Maisantu Te Maisantu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all my limbs grow strong, so also my breath, my speech, eyes, ears, and all my organs. All is Brahman, of which the Upanishads speak. May I never turn away from Brahman. May Brahman never turn me away. Let there be no turning away, at least on my side. I am engaged in the study of the self. The Upanishads speak of qualities that one must possess to succeed in such a study. May I acquire those qualities. Om, peace, peace, peace. So, disciple, by whose will is the mind drawn towards its objects? Who makes the vital breath, the first sign of life function? Ordained by whom do people utter words? Which God directs the eye, the ear, and the other organs? Teacher, it is Brahman. It, Brahman, is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath, and the eye of the eye. Therefore the wise, giving up the notion that they are associated with these organs, depart from this world. In other words, renounce this world and become immortal. The eye does not reach there, nor does speech, nor the mind. We do not know how a teacher can possibly explain it to a disciple. We do not know. So now we come then to verse 4. Anya deva tadviti tanto avidi tadati iti shushruma purvesham ye masta tvachachakshire. Says that Brahman is different from all known familiar objects. It is beyond even unknown objects. This is what we heard from the ancient ones, the teachers, who explained it to us. So in this world, there are objects that we know something about, and there are objects that we know nothing about. But the knowledge of Brahman is unique. It is beyond both of these categories of objects. It is self-knowledge. This knowledge cannot come from books, and it is not like mathematics, which a teacher can explain and you will understand. The knowledge of Brahman is something that flows from the teacher to the student. They say it is like lighting one lamp by another, and it is a revelation that comes all of a sudden. One cannot explain it. You may have a good intellect and vast scholarship, but even then you may not know Brahman. The Upanishads say, prepare yourself. When you are ready, the teacher will give you the knowledge. He will tell you who you are. Yet this Upanishad also says that Brahman is incomprehensible. You cannot know it because it is your own self. First, you must clear the ground and prepare yourself. Then, all of a sudden, the revelation will come and you will realize yourself. So Brahman, as I say, it can't be known. It's not known as simply it can't be known. And as I mentioned, there are things some things in the world we know about, and some things we don't know. But Brahman is in a different category. You know, like we may know what's going on in Chicago, but we don't know what the capital of Fiji is or other things. So we have knowledge and we have ignorance. But Brahman is not in either of those categories, and this is because it's impossible to know Brahman as in our normal sense, because knowledge, as we understand it, is something that comes through the mind and through the intellect. We experience things through the senses, or we read a book, and then we get information, we get knowledge and understanding through the mind. This is because both the senses and the mind, they can perceive an object and then develop understanding of that object. But Brahman is something that's cannot be conceived because it's something that beyond the mind. In other words, both the senses and the mind, they have to kind of look out. But who's there behind the mind, behind the senses? And this is the difficulty in understanding Brahman. We'll never see God in this world. We'll never see God standing in front of us. And even in the mind, we'll never see Brahman. We may have visions of form of God, but ultimately we can never see Brahman, because Brahman is the seer. And this is what we had on chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Chaitra Signandra. You have the field, you have experiences, all the different experiences that can come, both physical and mental, but then you have the knower of the field. You have the awareness, the consciousness, which is aware of that field. And out of that then comes knowledge. But the consciousness, the knower of the field, is not the same thing as the experience. You know, as we look out here, and we say, okay, I see a chair there. And we say, okay, I know that chair, and we think, okay, that we're actually seeing the chair, that the chair is a reality. That is your concrete reality. But actually, if you analyze our experience, and go a little deeper, you begin to realize that things aren't so kind of clear-cut as they seem to be. For example, Swami Varadananda pointed out that something's out there. We say, okay, we see the chair. The chair is really there. I'm really experiencing it. But Swami Vivekananda, he said, well, there's something out there. He said, call it X. And then from that something, some photons, rays come, and they come to the eye. And then they come to the optic nerve, and finally they come to the visual cortex in the brain. Now what we actually experience is not what's out there, but a reaction that takes place in the brain. And so it's like at Fermilab. Nobody in Fermilab, nobody sees the actual collisions that take place between the atomic particles and all. But they have instruments which, measure the reactions, measure the collisions. Those instruments then feed that information into the computer. And then the computer analyzes it and it produces data. So what the physicists and scientists at Fermilab are dealing with is not the actual thing itself, but the data that comes to them out of the computer. They never see what's actually there. They only know what, the information, data that they get through the computer. Now, our experience is different. We have senses, and those senses give us an experience of an external world. We see things, we hear things, we taste things, and so forth. And then the senses, they feed that information to the mind, to the brain, which then analyzes it, and then the mind gets information out of it. We get understanding and so forth. But we don't actually know what's actually there, because what we're experiencing is just a reaction that takes place within the mind. Now at Fermilab, if their equipment, which they use to record the collisions and so on, if the equipment is faulty, they're going to get wrong data. And if their computer programming is faulty, then they're going to get a misinterpretation of that data. Because the instruments, of the detecting instruments and the computer, if either one is faulty, then they get false information. In the same way, if our senses are faulty, if we have very bad eyesight or very poor hearing or something, we're not getting the correct information. We're not seeing things correctly. If, for example, if we were a dog, we would be hearing all kinds of things going on that we're not aware of now. We're only aware based on the quality of the particular equipment that we have. And then that equipment, it brings information that eventually comes to the mind. And then it's the mind that says, okay, this is what this means. This is how I understand this. But if our thinking is wrong, if our thinking or understanding is wrong, then we get a misperception. In other words, if the equipment is somehow defective, where we're not getting the correct information, but if the computer is defective, or if it has buggy software, then we don't get the correct information either. And this is a problem for most humans, is that our senses may be okay, but our software is buggy. You know, most people, what we interpret things, how we interpret things is totally off the mark, usually. Because it's just our minds and tends to distort whatever comes and fits it into a particular pattern based on our personality, on who we are, on what the state of our consciousness is. This is like Swami Vivekananda had said in one place, said, for the good person, this world is heaven. For the bad person, the same world is hell. And he said for the yogi, this very world is God himself. And actually all the time, we're living in God. But we don't know it, we're not aware of it. We're always seeing God, we're always with God, we're never separate from God. But even then, we don't, not aware of it at all. And this is where what the spiritual life and spiritual teachings are all about, is trying to remind us that the world you see is not the ultimate reality of things, that there's a deeper reality there, and you need to discover that reality. And so this is what they're saying. That when you say, okay, I see, you say, I see the chair, who sees? Now, the problem we have is that normally, when we say, I see the chair, and you say, well, who sees? Well, this body sees it. Or maybe think a little deeper, we say, well, the mind sees it. The mind's what's aware of it. But in truth, neither the body nor the mind actually is aware of things. They're both just instruments. But the thing that's aware of it is consciousness. Now that consciousness is not the experience. And this is where we normally tend to get confused. This is what they call Maya. We have an experience. Like right now, practically every one of us will say, I'm sitting in this room. I'm right here, I'm sitting in this room. But yet, actually, we're sitting in God. We're always in God, but we're not aware of it, because when the experience comes to us, we grab hold of it and say, this is me. I'm the one, I'm having this experience. And this experience is reality. But when you begin to probe deeper, then you begin to uncover the kind of vast, infinite nature of what's ultimately your own true self. Because this we talked about before, really when we say, I'm aware, I'm conscious, I exist, I'm here, the thing that's saying I'm aware, I exist, is Brahman itself. It's the consciousness, which is nothing other than Brahman. It connects to a particular set of instruments, a particular body, a particular mind, and then it says, oh, I'm this body here, I'm this mind here, I'm this person here. And then, according to the experiences that come, it says, oh, I'm happy, I'm having a good life, or painful experiences come, and then we say, oh, I'm miserable, I'm suffering, I'm unhappy. But actually, the consciousness, the thing that says, I'm aware of this, I'm experiencing this, is something completely different than even body and mind. And this is kind of the spiritual knowledge. Now, through body and mind, you experience things and you know things, but you don't know the one who's knowing. The only way, when they talk of the knowledge of Brahma, so they don't mean that it's the knowledge you can get out of a book or a lecture or something else. The only way you can know Brahman is to be Brahman. The only way you can know that inner consciousness is to be it. And this is the spiritual knowledge. It's not a concept, it's not an idea, it's not something that can be put into words, it's just being it. But on the way to that higher knowledge, it gradually begins to unfold from within you. And this is where, through meditation, things like this, gradually you begin to make a connection, make a contact with it. And then slowly it gradually begins to unfold. And that knowledge that you get from within is intuitive. It's not something you reason about and you reach a conclusion, or you study and you reach an understanding, a mental kind of a grasp of it. It's something that will gradually begin to reveal itself to you, and this then leads you into the ultimate state of actually being Brahman. Now, as soon as we let go of the body and the mind, soul, and spirit, and let go of that, then we are Brahman. Right there, because we've always been Atman. We've always been spirit. We've never been anything else, but we're holding on to things so tightly that we simply are not aware of it. And I said, when we see this life, when we experience this life, it's good to realize that it's not what we experience is not the ultimate reality. That we're actually, it's like we're watching a movie, we're seeing the movie unfold, and it can be entertaining, very enjoyable movie. But all the time, we are actually seated in the theater. All the time we're actually seated with God, and we're watching the movie unfold. As a person begins to become aware of this, then he's no longer confined. Like right now, for most of us, we're confined into this room. Because our mind, our consciousness has said, I'm this body, I'm sitting in this chair, and I'm here in this room. And then that's all we know. And when you begin to move back to your awareness of who you actually are, of what God actually is, then you're moving out of that confinement. And this is why in Hinduism, they frequently speak of salvation in terms of freedom. Right now we're bound. We're sitting in this room, and we are more or less forced to experience whatever goes on in this room. If somebody next to us kicks us or does that, we're forced to experience that. But when you begin to go back within yourself, then you're pulling back out of the experiences, out of the very limiting experiences, and back into their own infinite nature. And this is what they're trying to do. So this whole Upanishad is called Kena Upanishad because it starts off with the word Kena, which means by whom. And this is the theme of this Upanishad, is by whom do the eyes operate, by whom, by whose power does the mind operate, by whose power is this whole universe here, by whose power am I here? And like that, it begins to, as it looks at that, it begins to realize that it's not because of the eyes, it's not because of the ears. It's that when you're asleep, or when you're dead or something, the eyes and the ears can be perfectly functional. But they don't work. Why? Because consciousness isn't connected with it. And this is ultimately what we discover. We've talked about this theme before, back when we were studying Gita and things. And we mentioned that for most of us, our consciousness is considered, contained largely, our sense of identity is largely in the sense of I'm this body. You know, this is what is most of us, our sense of who we are or what we are. And so all along, we're saying consciousness. And we're saying, I'm this body, I'm this body. But we mentioned, for example, in the books that become popular on like near-death experiences. And one of the very common ones called out-of-body experiences, where the person is lying on the operating table and suddenly he finds himself up near the ceiling and he's looking down while the doctors are operating. And this is, you know, a fairly common experience that many people have had. But the point is that up to that point, the person said, I exist, I'm me, because of this body. But now suddenly, they find themselves up near the ceiling and they're looking down at the body. And they're seeing that body as an object, like the chair, or like the other doctors and nurses in the room, is just an object. But the I, the sense of this is me, it's still there. And that I, that sense of me, can go through many different kind of experiences, many different senses. So a person leaves this body, he goes to heaven somewhere. And for sometimes he says, I'm in heaven here. That body is kind of long gone, long forgotten, but now you're in heaven. And then again, it comes back, it takes on another body. And now it's saying, oh, this body is me. It may have been a man in one life and now a woman in another life, but all the time it's saying, this is me. But the thing within us that's saying this is me is not actually dependent upon or due to any particular body or any particular experience. It's something that is always there. When it identifies with any particular object, any particular body, or something like that, it becomes that body, and it becomes limited then by that body. But when it gets back into its own nature, when it says, wait a minute, who am I? Well, am I just this body? Am I just this mind? Or so then it discovers that it's actually the Brahman's consciousness. It's actually the universal consciousness out of which everything else has come. And then it becomes as vast, ultimately as vast as Brahman itself. And so this is the kind of the message of the Upanishads, is that the real self. And often when they're speaking of what we call God or Spirit, they refer to it as self. The self with a capital S. Because ultimately there's no difference between that higher self and what you are and who you are. Even though you think, oh, I'm just this particular person, eventually it begins to unfold that, oh, I'm that one infinite universal consciousness. And this is what that is called mukti, liberation, freedom. And when you simply know who you are, then you realize that I don't need to be any particular body or any particular limited kind of experience. I have the whole universe as my home. And this is also kind of the idea of the sannyasa of the monk. That normally people say, this is my life, I'm living it, and I'm trying to succeed, I'm trying to get what I can out of life. And then they identify, well, I have my family here, and I have my friends, and we may say, oh, I'm an American, or I'm identified, I like that. We have particular individuals, kind of that we identify and say, okay, these are my people. But in sannyas, or in kind of the monastic life or spiritual life, that is, you're universal. If somebody comes to you, you don't say, oh, this is my friend, I'll help them. This is not my friend, I won't help them. Like that. If suddenly you begin to see God, the same reality, the same being in all the forms. And this is what you're trying to ultimately achieve, is to realize that the self which is normally narrowed down to just, okay, I'm this person, and then goes through life seeking whatever that particular person wants, trying to achieve whatever that person wants to have, to realize that that same consciousness is throughout the universe. Yeah, I mentioned, I think last week, Swami Varadananda. He was a great Swami down in Sydney, Australia for some time. And then he went back to India. But he left the body recently. And when he's getting ready, he's going to go to Bellarmine, where we have a headquarters. One of the monks said, you know what, I'll see you at Bellarmine. And Swami Varadananda answered and said, I'll see you everywhere. Because his consciousness was at that point where it was not narrowed down to Swami Varadananda. It was the consciousness. And ultimately, that's possible for everyone because that's ultimately the reality of things. But, and so this is what's called pure consciousness. Means it doesn't grab hold of any kind of limiting, narrow idea of self, and instead it just is consciousness itself, and then it discovers that it's unlimited, that it is the infinite consciousness. And it's like Sri Krishna said, it's like you keep a fish in a little basket of water, like, you know. And he said, imagine the joy of that fish when you put it back into the ocean. And now it has the whole ocean to swim in. So like that, we're locked in our little basket. In our personal life, we're going to our job every day, we're doing this and that. And then you put us back out into the infinite ocean of Brahman, and then it's such a kind of a joy, and it's such a relief. And such wonderful things can begin to unfold. So this is, like I said, the main theme in this Upanishad is who is responsible? That the fact that we see or that we know or that we even exist. And it mentions that self-knowledge, in other words, the knowledge of Brahman is different than any other kind of knowledge. Because any other kind of knowledge you can get out of a book. You can study the highest philosophy, the highest theology and so on, you can get all that out of books. But those are just ideas about the reality. But the reality itself, you can only know by being that reality. And this is what is meant by self-knowledge. And this is why they say it can't be known. You can only be it, but you can't kind of look at it and say, oh, this is what it is. Any idea that you have about it is just a very narrow kind of mental concept about it. Whereas the thing itself is something completely different. And so this is, I think I mentioned last week the story about the Zen master, that once a professor of philosophy came to him, the Zen master, and the philosopher was full of knowledge and so on. But then the Zen master invited him for tea, and the Zen master began pouring tea into the cup. And he just kept pouring and pouring, and pretty soon he was pouring out of the cup and onto the table and onto the floor. And so the professor shouted and said, what are you doing? Now, can't you see that the cup is full? And then the Zen master said, well, you see, your mind is so full of your own knowledge that there's no room for Zen. You think you know the truth, but for that reason, there's no room for you to actually know the truth. And in the Gita it says, he who thinks that he knows, knows not, and he who knows not, knows. It is not a question of any kind of intellectual knowledge or understanding. But all of that, like I said, study of scripture, things like that, has its place because it's like if you're going to make a journey, you study the map. And then you can get clear on where you want to go. But the map doesn't take you any closer to where you want to go. It just makes it, you get you to understand, well, this is what I have to do. I have to take this route and this route and so on. But then, and there'll come a point, I think, in your life or your practice, where you realize that you really know everything you need to know. Now you just got to do it. And this is when you really kind of start on the journey. So the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, is not something like mathematics, which a teacher can explain and you understand. But they say it's more like lighting one torch with another. And this is one thing about spiritual knowledge and spiritual teachers, is that you can be a brilliant mathematician or a brilliant chemist and still be a really lousy person. Because you're going to be egotistical, selfish, temperamental, everything, because there's no relation between the knowledge of mathematics and the nature of your character. But on the other hand, spiritual knowledge, you can only have by being spiritual. And that means you have to be a kind of spiritual person. You can't be a bad person and give spiritual knowledge. You can give lectures and write books and things like that, but unless you have that spiritual consciousness, you can't really give it to anybody else. And the teaching, the true spiritual teaching, is something that's directly given to somebody else. And the example is that everybody in the world is carrying a torch, but none of our torches are lit. But a spiritual teacher, Guru, is somebody who's touched God, and now his torch is lit. And then he can then light your torch. And this is the nature of spiritual teaching, is something ultimately that's directly given. It may be by an external teacher giving, or it can come through your own inner consciousness. You know, when we speak of Guru, we shouldn't think of it as a person. Even when we think of incarnations, like Krishna, Rama, or Buddha, or any, we look, or Christ, and we look and we see, okay, there's a person here, a Christ, a very great holy man, an incarnation of God. And then we focus on that person and say, oh, this is God. But actually, that person, that the great kind of spiritual being, that incarnation, is only an expression, an embodiment of the reality of Brahman, and that very same Brahman is within our own consciousness. In other words, we look outside, we say, oh, this is a holy man, or this is a guru, or this is God, or so, and then we worship that form, but not realizing that what makes him the guru, what makes him the wonderful kind of spiritual being, is the presence of God that's flowing through him. And that very same presence is actually within each and every one of us. And we're all, each in our own ways, trying to express that, trying to manifest that into in the world. And so, this is what ultimately you begin to, that's right, is that what you're seeking, you already are, you already have, but you simply have to become aware of it. You have to become conscious of it. And so, and one other thing he mentions here that's important is that when the experience comes, it comes all of a sudden. Normally, when we're on the spiritual path, when we say doing meditation, or we're trying to be spiritual, we have a sense of progress. We have a sense of, okay, I'm getting a little better. My mind is getting calmer. I'm starting to feel a little happier. I'm starting to become a better person. And like that, with this sense of, I'm slowly getting better. But then we can also have a sense that, oh, I fell down. Now I fell off the wagon and now I'm back down, and so I have to pick myself up and start over again. And so like that, slowly we're going on. And as you do this, as you work along the spiritual path, things are getting better and better. And like more and more of the light is coming into your experience. You're starting to get some kind of wonderful experiences. You're starting to feel very happy and content and happy. But realization is something that comes in a moment. And it comes all. The whole thing comes all at once. Because realization is like waking up from a dream. within the dream. We're moving along, we're struggling, we have our the experience of being better or being worse, and, slowly unfolding more and more kind of wonderful things. We have that experience, but it's all ultimately within the dream, within the mind. But realization, on the other hand, is like waking up. Suddenly, you're one thing, you're this person struggling along the spiritual path, but then suddenly you wake up. And now you're Brahman, now you're spirit, now you're Lord. This is who I am, this is what I am. And once you've attained that, then it doesn't take a lot of struggle or effort to maintain it. It's like once you're awake, you're awake. You may have to struggle a little bit at first to stay awake, but once you're awake, basically that becomes your natural state. And you never kind of actually lose it from then on. So this is the difference between our ordinary kind of spiritual progress and growth and development and actual realization. By moving along the spiritual path, by struggling and practicing meditation, things like that, we're getting benefits. We're developing. We're growing more and more of the light is starting to come. But eventually there comes a point of just where suddenly there's this shift in consciousness. Suddenly I was this individual struggling along, seeking God, and suddenly, here's God, and it's right here. And this is kind of the actual way of things. No matter how good we are, or how bad we are, we may be in the highest heaven or the lowest hell, it doesn't make any difference in terms of realization. Because no matter what you're dreaming, it doesn't make any difference once you wake up. And this is what is meant by the spiritual knowledge. But that spiritual knowledge, it can come theoretically. It can come any moment, in a second, because it's always there. But practically, it usually takes a lot of practice, a lot of meditation, a lot of really thinking on these things to kind of be ready for it. But when the saying is that when the student's ready, the guru will come. It doesn't mean necessarily a physical guru, a particular person will come. But when the student is truly ready, then the knowledge will come. But it comes only when you want it, and not it in order to get something else. And this is for a long time. We tend to kind of approach God primarily in terms of what am I getting out of it. We're seeking peace of mind, we're seeking to be happy, we're seeking prosperity in the world. One of our devotees he was a printer, the printing press, he got into Vedanta now. But he kept complaining, here I'm being so spiritual, why aren't we rich? And so, like that, people tend to think, for a long time, we tend to want to use God. Prayer for most people means you call on God, go fix this, do this, fix that. But it's only when you want God Himself, when you want the truth itself, when you want this knowledge itself, this is when it comes. And so they say, that when you're trying to meditate, they say, don't take any of your problems, any of your worries, any of your concerns about the world, don't take that into the meditation. Often, I think in the beginning, we tend, when we get down, we get quiet, we get away from distractions, and then we start brooding about all the things that are going on in our life, and all the things we'd like to have, and but they say, leave all that outside the meditation. And this is Swami Varadananda. He used to say that when he would go into the shrine, he would say, the tradition, even here, is that, before you go to the shrine, you take your shoes off and you leave them outside. So when he took his shoes off, he said, I'm leaving all my worldly concerns and leaving with the shoes. Now I go, and I just go because I want to be with God. And this is the type of meditation, the type of prayer that works when you just want to be with God. And you'll find that if you can do that, often you'll find that your problems, everything else will also kind of sort themselves out. They'll just take care of themselves without you thinking about it. And as a person begins to develop a relationship with God, a sense of presence, a sense of connection, they begin to find that I don't need to worry. I don't need to think about anything. I don't need to wonder about it. Just leave it in the hands of God, and everything just whatever you need. And the closer you come together, whatever you need at the deepest level, that will come to you. But if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about what you want to get out of that, then it doesn't. But if you just concentrate on God, just concentrate on being with God, then you'll find all the other things kind of added unto you. So now we come, this is verse 5. Yadvachana byuditam yena vaga byujate tadeva brahman tvam vidhi nedham yadidam upasate. It says, know that alone to be Brahman, which cannot be described by speech, and by which speech becomes a vehicle of expression. Yet Brahman is not this sense world that people worship. So speech cannot reveal the self of Brahman. Why not? Because the self reveals speech. There would be no speech at all without the presence of the self. The Upanishad, this Upanishad begins with the question, who is behind all this phenomenon? We are impressed by the phenomenal world. We are impressed by the workings of our minds and other organs. So we ask, who or what power is behind them? Scientists sometimes say that if there is a creator, then he must be a great mathematician, because everything is so well calculated in this world. Others say he must be a great engineer. Seeing how everything works so smoothly, all of us at times wonder, who makes this possible? It is Brahman that makes it possible. The Upanishad tells us to try to know that Brahman. This phenomenal world seems so real to us, and by running after objects of this sense world, we in fact worship it. But we have to know that this world is nothing. It is an appearance. By running after worldly objects, we run after that which is unreal. And that is why we suffer. Behind this phenomenal world is Brahman, the reality. And we are one with that Brahman. We have to get rid of our delusion and try to realize Brahman. So as long as we are absorbed in the world, as long as we are running after it and constantly kind of focus on, we'll have ordinary life with its experiences of pleasure, pain, of happiness and sorrow, and so forth. But when we begin to look kind of behind the world, we begin to look within, begin to ask, well, who's there? What's the reality? When we begin to move in that direction, then we find things begin to unfold that are beyond even anything we can even imagine. The mystics, the saints say that what you begin to experience, that spiritual, is so far beyond anything you can even dream of, that all the joys, the successes, the pleasures, all the things in the world, they become just all dreary, just boring. Whereas whatever you get from inside, through your own inner spirit, that fulfills you completely. We mentioned many times that people think, if I had $1 million, I'd be happy, and they find that even after they get the $1 million, they're not happy. Now, they're pretty much the same. But whatever you get spiritually brings with it its own fulfillment, its own joy, its own satisfaction. And a great sense of, yes, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. everybody in the world, they're trying to find happiness. And everybody's running all kinds of different directions, thinking this will make me happy or this will make me happy. And most people just kind of, after a while, settle for just being unhappy. But the idea, the spiritual idea is that happiness is something you are, it's not something that you get. As long as you're thinking, I'm going to need this thing or that thing in order to be happy, now you're always going to be frustrated. But when you find happiness in this true place, which is the ananda, the bliss that's there within your own inner consciousness, then that happiness is completely satisfying. And you'll find that if you're happy, all your experiences become happy. The very experiences which now seem such a problem or so make us so unhappy, even those become pleasant, joyful, like a play. Like for children, everything's kind of a game. And even what we call work is for the child is play. But as you become adults, more and more, it's less play and more just work. But if you find some of your own, begin to find some of your own inner resources, you find everything you need is there. Everything you need to cope with the world, that all sense of fear, all sense of worry, everything else, all begins to dissolve as you begin to get even a tiny bit of awareness of who you actually are. And this then is what then produces everything else. So we're thinking that what we experience is reality, is the truth, is what's real. And then for many people, God and Spirit, and these things are kind of, they're vague and they're not really real. What's real is what's right here. And so as long as we think in those terms, then we're limited to what we can experience right here. And sometimes it will be happy and we'll be fairly enjoying it. Other times, it can be very unpleasant. But when we begin to kind of reverse our direction, begin to see within, then we'll find everything starts to unfold, and with it brings a total sense of confidence, a total sense of there's a good power protecting me. It's like a baby being carried by its mother. It knows it's safe and sound, it has nothing to worry about. That consciousness will come fairly quick as soon as you get even a small sense of, yes, there's this presence here, this presence behind me, this infinite, omniscient, all-loving, all-powerful presence is there within me. And then, as you feel that it's protecting you, it's guiding you, it's taking care of you, then all sense of worry goes away. But when we ignore it and get totally absorbed in the outside world, then we're caught up. And we're just battered this way and that by experiencing some good, some bad, and all like that. We're just kind of caught up in this kind of rat race going around and around and around and not really getting anywhere. So let's see, we have one more verse. Verse 6. Yan manasa namanuti yena hur manomata tadeva brahma tvam vidhinedham yadidam upasate. It says, know that alone to be Brahman, which the mind cannot comprehend, and which they, in other words, the sages say, makes the mind function. Yet Brahman is not this sense world that people worship. So we think our minds are so powerful, but here's the limitation of the mind. It fails to grasp Brahman. Why? Because it is Brahman that makes the mind function. Without Brahman, the mind is powerless. Our goal should be to realize this Brahman, which is no other than our own self. Let us concentrate on this Brahman, leaving aside everything else. So a teeny Brahmin, you get everything. Whereas a teeny, anything in the world, well, you get a little kind of, even if you're emperor or a king or something, even then, you only get a little tiny thing. Yeah, I think you all heard about these terracotta figures over in China. It's a whole army of like these very realistic soldiers and things. It's really an amazing kind of thing that they discovered. But one of the early emperors of China he had just conquered China, had become an emperor, started a dynasty, I forget his name, but he conquered the whole world that he was known at that time. But then he started thinking, I've got everything, I've got the whole world, but I'm going to die. And so then he built all those palaces and horses and soldiers and everything so that he could take it with him after he died. But like that, even if things are very good in our life, everything, we're faced ultimately, right? Someday this will end. And but when you begin to get the little bit of this spiritual awareness, that worry leaves you. You realize that what we call death is not the end at all, that there's vast reality there, and that this particular life is just a little small segment. Like one day at school. You go to school for one day, then you go home. Home is in spirit, it's not in this world. But it is interesting. I mentioned before how there's a lot of literature now that started about these near-death experiences and so forth, where people, they almost die and they kind of go up and then they'll come back to the world. But one thing they found out is that people who've had these experiences, invariably, they lose all fear of death. Because they see, there's the universe is so much vaster and has so much more meaning than I was aware of, and then their all sense of worry, of fear, it leaves, because they know they've had a little experience that there's something much beyond this, that this is only just a little tiny bit. And it's like Swami Varadananda said in one place that even the person who's seen a ghost is better than a theologian. Because at least he's experienced something. At least he knows, yes, there's something here. Whereas the theologian or the intellectual, he's just all kind of ideas in the head without really knowing for sure, in fact, what the reality is. So this is, I said, throughout the Upanishads. Anyway, throughout the Upanishads, and through all the scriptures, through all the Vedanta, the basic idea is that the only thing that exists is God. The only thing that exists is Brahman. It's just a question of whether we're aware of it or whether we're not. If we're not aware of it, then we'll have experiences according to good or bad and so forth. But if we're aware of it, then you have everything. The human existence, the whole problems, everything we face, the reason that we're not in the Garden of Eden anymore is because we've separated ourselves from God. We're saying, I'm here, I'm this particular person, this particular individual, and God's off somewhere else. And that is the source of all our problems. As soon as you become aware that actually I'm here, but God is here too, then all the problems begin to dissolve. And you find everything then is functioning perfectly. So we'll stop here. Next week we should finish in chapter 1. So now this Sunday we're going to have a special talk by Swami Varadananda from Chinmaya Mission. He's going to come and speak on Ganesh, because we had Ganesh Chaturthi recently. And so he's also bringing a group of children and some adults, I think, who are going to do some chanting. There's about 15 will be here. So they'll do some chanting and he will give a talk then on Ganesh. Last month Swami had invited the Swami Kriyananda, or Brahmachari Kriyananda from the Kriya Yoga Center over in Australia. So now we invited Swami Varadananda, because Swami Vivekananda, he's in New York right now. He's got programs in New York and Philadelphia, and he'll be back late Monday night. Okay, so that'll be this Sunday. Then tomorrow evening we have Shivanam. So we have RT from 7 to 7:30, then we'll have Shivanam, and then Prasad will be served afterwards.
Swamiji, may I ask one question?
Yeah.
You said that he who knows not, he who knows not.
Yeah.
And he who knows not knows.
Yeah.
The second category of person who knows not knows. How does he communicate and transmit his knowledge to the other people?
This is where they say this true spiritual teaching cannot be expressed in words or given in words. It's given by transmission of power. Now, I think I mentioned last week how Swami Varadananda, who did one of our translations here of the Upanishads, he did Gita, so on. He was also General Secretary of the Order. One of the greatest scholars and one of the most powerful people in the Order. He was like the General Secretary's administrative head for the whole Order, and he was one of the best. But towards the end of the life, when he became president of the Order, which is like that's the spiritual head of the Order, then when people would ask him to talk, to give a lecture, he'd go, towards the end, he became almost completely silent, wouldn't talk at all. And people would ask him, oh, give a talk, say a few words. He'd just say, I don't know anything, I know nothing. But yet, I know somebody who was initiated by him, and the power that came to that initiative, it was quite, it was very strong. And so like that, they communicate directly through transmitting spiritual power. And this, only someone who has attained oneness with God, union with God, has that capacity. Like I said, he's like his torch is lit, and so he can light somebody else's torch. And then that power he transmits, that's what does the teaching. If he lectures and so forth, that's secondary. But Swami Varadananda, one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, he said that unless a person has surrendered completely to God, unless he's become united with God, he said he doesn't have the saving power. He says he may still have the charisma, the ability to lecture, wonderful, give brilliant talks and things like that, but only somebody who has become united with God has the capacity to kind of give that knowledge to somebody else. And so that's how they teach. They may, if they talk or give words, that's a secondary thing. And this most actually, we've had many senior Swamis, great Swamis have come here, and particularly in the early days we had many second generation Swamis, like Swami Varadananda and other, who were disciples of direct disciples. And the thing about them is that when they're here, changes take place inside of you. You're just suddenly, you're in a different mood, a different state of mind, different things are happening, and that's one of the signs. A person can talk, as I said, they can talk a great talk, but not necessarily be able to lift you up kind of spiritually.
My question related to that example, one example. The great teachers of spirituality in the world, like Lord Rama incarnation, Sri Krishna, Jesus Christ, Sri Ramakrishna, they never said that they know not, and yet they said they know it. And they communicated in the world to the people. How come, if they did not know, and they did know really about God, about Brahman, they communicated with the people and they transformed their lives? How did they do it?
Well, no, it doesn't mean that they don't talk, but that what they brought. See, anybody, say, could give the same teachings as Christ gave, the same morality, same thing, it wouldn't have any effect at all. But what Christ gave, people have written down the words he spoke, but what he really gave to the world was an influx of spiritual light and power that uplifted the consciousness of the world. In other words, what we see in their books or their teachings, well, the words is a kind of only the surface of things. What they really brought was spiritual light and power. It's like Swami Vivekananda at the Parliament of Religions, when he said, "Sisters and brothers of America," there's nothing special about the words, but the world changed at that point, because behind that was this tremendous spiritual power. So, it doesn't mean that they will not talk, although there are some sages and so forth that, like Ramana Maharshi, he never talked at all. But he doesn't, particularly if they're meant to be teachers in the world, then they'll talk, lecture, do things, but behind the talk and the books or anything else is the spiritual power, the spiritual consciousness, and that's what really kind of does the work. Again, Swami Varadananda. Somebody asked him again, what's the difference between you giving a talk on Vedanta and a professor giving a talk on Vedanta? And when Swami Varadananda said, well, when a professor gives a talk on Vedanta, they be very erudite, very good, polished, very good language and so forth. He said, but when one of Ramakrishna's direct disciples, when we speak, the veils of Maya are removed. And so anyway, that's the difference, that the real spiritual teaching is kind of removing the veils of Maya, and that doesn't come just through words or through like clever, although that's a part of it. That's also a form of teaching, because most people, that's the only way they can get access to it. So any other questions? Om Asatoma Sadgamya Tamasoma Jyotirgamya Amrityorma Amritam Gavya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace. But it's like, Sri Ramakrishna, he used to teach all the time, we have the gospel and all. But when he would try to explain Brahman, the knowledge of Brahman to somebody, he said, it's like somebody's pressing down on my tongue. He said, I can go up to a certain point and then I can't express it anymore or say anything. And so it's kind of like that. It doesn't mean he didn't teach, and also, he had the power to change people's minds, to give them salvation, to do whatever in addition to just talking. Okay, any other questions?